Racial Justice Subcommittee is sponsoring this, thanks to Social Justice Committee. Whether you know Bob Gayle as our guitarist, yes, for the Any Sunday Given Band, or as an RE teacher, we're gathered here to learn about his unique life with his parents, who were activists on Long Island. So with no more words, I present Bob Gayle.
Now we have the technical difficulties out of the way. We'll get started. I titled this thing, Living in Two Different Worlds. It's very interesting because basically, even though I grew up in the 60s, the end of the 50s, 60s, 70s, I grew up in Great Neck Estates. And Great Neck Estates is completely different than where most blacks were growing up at the time. And I had a completely different life in Great Neck Estates as opposed to when I would go with my parents to any of the civil rights locations or anything that we had to do. When we got there, it was a completely different world. So I'm going to start off with civil rights. Now, this one is from helpfulprofessor.com, and I think that was when .com started. I mean, this definition, which actually even includes LGBTQ rights on it, is so old I can't even tell you. But as we know right now, these same issues are presenting to us today. The information is in the Constitution, but that doesn't seem to matter really much because that's not one of those documents that people really check that often anymore. So it's not one of the things it's going to do. If we're on social media or something, I guess people would know more about the Constitution. But since they don't, they don't. Oh, you think I need a mic? No.
Can everybody in the back hear Bob?
Yeah. So, the problem. We were black and we didn't have any civil rights. We had zero. So that's a big problem. Racial segregation and discrimination was the law, not a possibility or something. That was the actual law. And there was no legal recognition of federal protection for citizenship. Any of the things that we're talking about for immigrants today, forget it. We had nothing. So my perspective is on this because of the two different worlds. And when I say the two different worlds, one is Great Neck and Great Neck Estates, church coming here, and the other is once I left Long Island, or I went to anywhere, I went to the city, if I went to cousins' houses, or if I went with my parents on any of these things that I'm going to tell you about in terms of civil rights expectations that we did. Now, I got there because of my parents, Hector and Kathleen, very involved in civil rights. And I figured, you know what, let's do it this way. My mom, graduate of Hunter College, postgraduate studies at Hunter, UPenn, Fordham, CW Post, Hofstra, New York University, charter member, National Sorority Phi Delta Kappa. She was a teacher. She taught junior high, adult ed, and special needs children. She was the executive director for the North Shore Community Arts Center. She was a life member of the NAACP. She was the education chairman for the NAACP for Manhasset and Great Neck. She was a member of the Great Neck Estates Environmental Commission. She was a founding board member of the Great Neck Manhasset Equal Opportunity Commission. She was a trustee for the Great Neck Library. She was a board member for the Nassau County Children's Center, and she was the director of the United Neighborhood Activity Plan. What that meant when you were a kid is you didn't see your parents a lot at these meetings. If you think that's bad. My father, graduate of Fordham University, postgraduate studies at Fordham University School of Social Studies. He started off as a senior investigator for the New York State Liquor Authority because they had to have black people go into the speakeasies that were owned by black people or you weren't coming out. So, he was also a Kings County Supreme Court officer, and that little page right there The FBI actually came to him and wanted him to work for the FBI because they were looking for minorities to work in the FBI so they could infiltrate organizations, so they could get information, and all the rest of this. He had been honorably discharged from the Army, so he could fire a weapon. He was articulate, so he was perfect as far as they were concerned. He said no. He became the executive director of Glen Cove Equal Opportunity Commission. Then he was raised to the executive director for the Town of North Hempstead Urban Renewal and Community Development Agency. He consulted on housing and community development across Long Island. He was life and board member of the Great Neck NAACP. He was the chairman of the United Way for Nassau Suffolk. He was the associate trustee at North Shore University Hospital. He was associate trustee at Long Island Jewish Hospital. He was on the board of directors of the National Conference of Christians and Jews for Nassau and Suffolk. He was the president of the Long Island Directors for Urban Renewal. He was a member of the commission to design a legislature for Nassau County back in the 70s when they decided to revamp the entire legislature for Nassau County. He was a member of the Nassau County Office of Housing and Intergovernment Affairs. He was the vice president of the New York State Association for Renewal and Housing Officials. He was that organization's Man of the Year in 1984, and if you live in Roslyn or nearby there, you vote in the community center, which is named after my father. That also meant he was not home alive. For good. He built all of the low and middle income housing that there is in Nassau County between 1967 and 1986. And this was my first introduction into that there were locations that were not like Great Neck Estates. Going around with him to see these type of things. So for me, World One was like this. I had manicured lawns. Everyone in Great Neck Estates has a manicured lawn. Everyone in Great Neck Estates has a car or two. Everyone's sitting around, there has a TV, and they're having their Harriet moment, the Harriet Nazi moment, and they're sitting there, everyone's drinking coffee and Grey Poupon and all the rest of that. So I'm like, okay. So, but we get in the car, and we drive. And strangely enough, it looks like this. And I'm like, wow, this is kind of interesting. This was like, Spinney Hill, starting off in Long Island. This was in New York. Starting like this. This is the way that blacks were living. And I had no idea until I started leaving Great Neck and seeing what the heck's going on. So, when we moved to Great Neck, we first moved on, we were at Cumberland Avenue. They wanted us to move to Great Neck Estates, but there was no house there. So first we lived on Cumberland Avenue. When a house became available, we moved to Great Neck Estates. When we got there, as it says here, my parents were asked to move there by the NAACP. We were a test family. They were trying to see how far progress had been made, if blacks who actually had an income, were articulate, or going to be accepted in a community. And it was all over that this was happening. I lucked out because we moved into Great Neck Estates, and Great Neck Estates had already flipped the switch. It was a very progressive Jewish community. It was people who already were kind of willing to assimilate people, willing to be open, willing to have other people. And it was good for me because I'm the only black kid. So, we're the first and only black family in Great Neck Estates. All my neighbors and friends were white. Most of my friends were Jewish. I was the only black kid at Clover Drive School. So when I was a little kid and it's nap time and all the rest of that, I'm the only black kid, But as I said, it wasn't like kids moving away from me saying, I don't want to sit next to them. It was just I was another kid. I wasn't really getting that. I was the only black kid at the Stepping Stone in Allenwood Park Summerwood camps. When we go to camp, I'm the only black kid there. And I was the only black kid at the Great Neck Estates pool when we go swimming. And we found out about our church. Basically, when my parents were doing marches, we would have people from church coming for these marches, just like we go now when we do things. They would show up, they would start talking to my parents like, you really gotta come check out this church, you really gotta come check out this church. So, when you're the only black kid, it kind of looks like this. Okay? Every everybody else is not you, and you're kind of there. You know, one nation under God, you're wondering exactly what we're talking about, but this was what was going on in Great Neck. And like I said, they just were like, I was kind of like another kid. Now, I did not live like a black kid, as I've been telling you, in the 60s and 70s. We had a house in the suburbs. We had 2 cars. I went to summer camp. I went to the pool. I went on summer vacations. My grandparents had a summer house upstate. I played lacrosse. A lot of black people playing it. Tennis, golf, hockey. A lot of black hockey players. Baseball. I skied. When I was skiing, I did not see any black people. We had a boat. I water skied. I played guitar, I played in bands, and I went to a lot of political and civil rights meetings because, as I said, my parents were not going to be home. They were going to go to all these meetings. So I would go, as would all the other kids of all the other people who had political aspirations go, and I would end up meeting them. Andrew Cuomo. He was like this. I was like this. I would meet him. His father was it. His father, Mario, was actually one of the attorneys for the town at one point, and that's how my father met him. So I was basically treated like every other kid in Great Neck. I was just another kid. I got to be on sports teams because I was really good at sports. I got to have friends like that. Those were the type of criteria that that was going on in terms of me interacting with people at that time. However, other test kids didn't actually get the same setup that I got when I got in there. As you can see, sometimes they're talking to you and you're just like sitting there. There's no teacher going to stop it or anything. You're just stuck. Or you have to be escorted in and out of school because they're threatening to kill you. And of course, you get the morons standing outside with signs all the time. I didn't get that. I got that by going places and seeing and going, what the heck is going on here? This is what was going on. So, when I left Long Island, I went over the bridge. My eyes were open as to what's going on here. Now, for going over the bridge, the first times in my memory, going back, are basically vacations. When you're vacation and you're black in the 60s, you're not just going anywhere because you can't get out the car because you don't know where you can stop. You can only stop in a place that's going to let you stop there and not call the police or not do something to you. So we went north. You weren't going south and having a good vacation, I'll tell you that. So we went north. And we would drive, and as you can see here, to the middle of, going towards Canada in those days, there is nothing but road signs and like the frontier town and all that. I kept thinking we were going to frontier town every other year because I loved it. It was like one of the only places that would allow blacks to go and all that, so that's why we were going. And the problem with this, we cater to white trade only. So, that's the bathroom, that's when you want to get something to eat, that's you want to get out of the car and stretch your legs. And when it was like this, it was a double sword because basically, if you walk on the property, if the sign's off, you walk on the property, it's technically trespassing. Back then, trespassing means they could shoot you, they could set the dog out on you, they could beat you up. So yeah, you don't really know if this is going to work. So we had lists. My mother would get like triptych, if you remember those things back in the day, and she would have marked out where we can go to the bathroom, where we can go, what the story's going to be. We're driving up there, my father's got fried chicken in one hand, his Michelob beer in the other hand, and he's driving, because we don't get to stop. And we've got to eat in the car, and we got to keep going. And just to make sure we're talking about where we're going here, this is the 60s. It's not the 50s, it's not the 40s, the 30s. This is a evening lynch party.
Oh, God.
Yes. I cut off the top part so you don't have to deal with the top part. But this was an unfortunate couple who wandered into their town and then were strung up. So that's one of the reasons we did not get out the car. The other reason, once got out, you got this. No dogs. I was always happy. Look, at least we're above Mexicans. I guess that's where we're going. Is that where we're up to with this? No dogs, no Negroes, no Mexicans. This is the white side. This is the colored side. I kept going, what is colored? What are we talking about? Well, it means don't drink over there. Don't get your clothes washed. You're not sitting down in the waiting room. You guys are standing outside. And when you go to sporting events, there's still, we went to Grambling State. It's a black university. We're watching black football players. There's a colored section. I'm like, what the heck? But that was going on, unfortunately, all over the country. Now, people didn't just want to put up the signs. People started wanting to get out and start being crazy. Race mixing, they're not talking about marriage. They're just talking about letting us live next to them. That's the mixing they're talking about. That they don't want mixing, that they're standing up here, psychotically ready to do just about anything to keep you out of it. Big problem. Now, it's not like it was like one little location. It was going across all over the place. As you can see, they're all happy. These aren't ancient pictures. They're just in black and white. And you would go and you had a problem everywhere you went. Because at some point, you're going to run into someone who feels that they have the liberty to do whatever they would like to do because you really can't do anything. Those signs that you saw before, they were from the police. The National Guard would come. It's not like you have anyone to talk to about this. So let's get to where we're talking about. Oh, we're talking about the civil rights movement. So how are we going to do something about this? Strategies, groups, social movements to have a common goal of ending legalized racial segregation and discrimination in the United States. Securing legal recognition for federal protections for citizenship and just being an American. And between 1955 and 68, it was characterized by a lot of major campaigns. What could we do to try and change something like this? Well, the people who were trying to do that were Martin Luther King, Jesse Jackson, A. Philip Randolph, Ruskin, Wilkins. I would get up, I would come downstairs, these people would be in my house. They're having conversations. Why? Because we were the only clean house in this area that they could come to and they could get there and it wasn't going to be followed and it wasn't going to be this, it wasn't going to be that. So, but for me, these were just guys. They're just, I don't get down to go downstairs and play. It wasn't like I was thinking, oh my God, Reverend King's in my house, and it was just like, when's he leaving? You also need politicians. And as you will recall, if you've lived here at any time, the Republican machine in the 70s was what ran Long Island. So everybody in government who had a job and was going to do anything was going to be Republican, including my father. He had to be a Republican, he didn't get the job. Wow. Joseph Margiata, the head kingpin boss, he ran everything until he went to jail. And even after he was in jail, I remember going to the Swan Club, and there he was. And I was like, Joe. And he goes, oh yeah, I'm out for, he's like out for a birthday party or something. I'm like, what the hell? Al D'Amato, Mike Tully, you see their names all over the parks and everything. Well, I would run into them. Well, you needed to have the minorities and blacks who were educated, who were doing things on your team. You needed this politically so that you could show you're trying to do something about it. So my father, as you saw from the list of things, was very popular. He's on the board of trustees for the hospital. We're going here, we're going there. We're going all over the place to try and put this thing together. So, there was going to be some major campaigns. Back in the day, major campaigns mean a lot of walking, because we marched. So, Montgomery bus boycott, that's where Rosa Parks, prayer pilgrimage, youth march, Albany, Birmingham. the Birmingham campaign also included children. As they tried to have children march. I'll tell you about that later. Walk for Freedom, March for Washington, that's a big one we'll talk about. St. Augustine movement, Selma, Chicago Open, Memphis sanitation strike, which was not very good for Martin Luther King because that's where he got killed, and Poor People's Campaign. Now, the one thing that connected all of these things was this. It was going to be a non-violent thing. It was not going to be something where we're going to hit back. No, if they spit in your face, you're not going to hit them. They slap you, you're going to turn the other cheek. You do it. Now, of course, at the same time that Martin Luther King was talking about this, you have some opposing voices, like Malcolm X, or in the beginning of the Black Panthers, that, you know, I don't know, I think maybe they should be afraid of us as opposed to we're doing this. So there are all these competing things going on, but at this point, there was a centralized type of feel that Martin Luther King was kind of at the top of this food chain, and it was a non-violent type of situation. So, we marched. This one was marching for voting rights, because when I was born, we didn't get to vote. So there was no voting. We're just saying, hey, we need to vote too. We're here. How come we can't vote? So we marched for votes. We had a problem in school, segregation. We marched for school. We marched for trying to get school things together. And when we marched, as I said, black and white together, and that's how we started. As I said, we got involved in our church. We met them doing this. They would be on these lines. They would be out there and they're saying, you gotta come to this church, you gotta come to our church, you gotta come to our church. Now, you do that, and unfortunately, what starts happening is this. You get the idiots coming out, they're trying to throw at you. You get the big people, groups coming out, they're trying to say things to you. It's a big problem. That problem got worse because they're going to use the National Guard and the Army, where this guy's saying, is there really a need to stick a bayonet in this woman's face? And let me tell you, anytime they came, bayonets were attached. There's no such thing as just that. Bayonets are always attached. As you can see, not a good thing. Bayonets didn't work. It's time for the fire hoses. So, Boston Fire Department right there. Now, the two things I want you to take a look at about these pictures are, one, you see this wall? It's clean, because they're spraying us. You see over here, it's dirty. It's like power washing. They washed the dirt off of this spot here. That's how long they're doing it. That's the first thing I want you to understand. Second thing is, you see all these people? They're waiting in line to go, because we're not stopping. So after you smack these people down, they're just standing there waiting because they're going too. And that was the way it went. When that didn't work, we went to dogs. Dogs are always fun as well because, as you can see, you can't really control dogs all the time. So you had the march, and there was this whole nonviolent thing going on so that people would just like go ahead and just look at people like this. I can't believe you're treating another human being like this. And that was going to be the play, and that was going to go on. We also had kids. So, kids marched. There's Martin Luther King standing there giving a little pep talk because marching is not a good thing. Marching is like an all day, no bathrooms, outside in the heat, walking around type of thing, where when you're a kid particularly, you're not really getting it, and you're really like, wow, this really sucks. Hours and hours of marching around. Give my mom a job. However, after a while, the kids had a little problem too. Because I actually did this one too. Because when they come, it's like they don't want you either on the sidewalk or you had to be on the side of the sidewalk. You couldn't be in the middle of the sidewalk. Every time they had something else. So like kids, we would like, you get in front and then they'd be walking. And then you walk, and then you walk, and then you walk like this, and then after a while, they're running, and you're running, and then they run off. But this is what's going on. So we tried sit-ins. So you sit down, the mob comes, they take their food, everything else, they pour it on top of your head, or they arrest you. Here's Martin Luther King with Coretta Scott being arrested. He came and asked for a glass of water, said he'd pay for it. You notice this guy's taking the money, but he's having him arrested. It's a problem. So we figured we got to do something bigger. So this idea I remember hearing about as a very little kid, that they're going to have this gigantic march. And this one was going to be different, and I knew this one was going to be different because we're talking about more people than they've ever seen. That's one of the type of words I'm hearing. They're talking, my mother is already planning, all the black women are marching in high heels. So why are you marching in high heels? Because if you take a high heel off and you have to hit somebody with it, you're going to put a divot in their head. That's why they're marching in high heels. My mother had her 12-inch nail file. All the women, everyone had in their pocketbook this. This was not going to be any march. This time we're not doing the hose. We're not doing the dogs. Luckily, it didn't turn out that we had to get that way. But this was going to be a throwdown one. So they're going to have this march. It's going to be gigantic. And now I get in the car to go to this march as a kid. They closed down Washington, D.C. It was just empty, like a ghost town. It's army, it's police, it's us. That's it. Get there day before, because we had learned already that if you get there the day of it and you go walking out there, they already have the hoses, they already have the dogs, they already have that. So this time, we get there the day before, they're going to go and we're going to start filling up things before sunrise. So this time, it was going to be a lot of people. This time, everybody's going to watch their back. This time, we're not going to leave room on the side for emergency service vehicles to come with their hoses and knock us over. This time, we're not going to do it that way. This time, we're going to make sure the government understands that this is a crowd, not the message. This is like a Trump crowd, right? So, we get there, as you can see, it's pandemonium, and I've been taken to this hotel, which is not right there, because you have to find a hotel that would accept blacks. They know this is coming, they're all boarded up, the whole 9 yards. And my mother is explaining to my brother, and I'm standing there listening to where we're supposed to run if they don't come back. If they come to the hotel, this is the door we're going to get out. We got to go through the woods. We got to go over the dale and over here, and then there's going to be a group of adults who are going to get us and the rest of the kids, and there's going to be a bus, not a bus, a panel truck, because it had to be an unmarked truck, because if it was a bus, you know what they were going to do to buses, so it couldn't be a bus. And I'm listening saying, what the heck is going on? So that was the plan there, and as I said, that's why I said this one's going to be different, but luckily that didn't happen. We didn't have to have that. What happened was, his I Have a Dream speech. And he goes over his I Have a Dream speech. Everyone loves this. At the end, we're standing there. And if you notice, we had to have a little problem with security. Who could you talk to get information? As I said, with asking my father about the FBI and infiltrating the organization, they had blacks who were working for them. You couldn't really talk to just anybody. You had to have something. So you see this little pin here. Those are the pins for the people that you can actually go up to and talk to. And I'll pass around so we all have a little piece of history to touch. Here are my family's pins. This side, you guys can go back. So, I'm like, this is like out of control, that this is how this is all going to go. So, unfortunately, it did get worse. We had the march, we thought things were looking up, There was going to be some changes coming on in terms of how things were portrayed, how we were treated, and that's when this started happening. It turned in 1968 into a whole different world. Because when they shot Martin Luther King, that was the end of the guy who was going to say nonviolence, and now everyone is fed up to hear about what's going on. And it completely changed. They're killing the president, they're killing the brother. I mean, it was a whole different world. I'm sitting doing homework, and my mother gets a call. She's crying. What's the matter? Don't go back to homework when they're there. Martin Luther King had just been shot. Next thing, the police come. They had put squad cars in front of my house because they didn't want people throwing a Molotov cocktail through our window in Great Neck. So we had the Great Neck police sitting out in front of our house for days after his assassination in terms of what's going on. So it was a crazy time. So in my time, this is what we're talking about. From that I Have a Dream speech in 1963. 64, the year later, they passed the Civil Rights Act declaring discrimination illegal. So it took till 1964. Before that, it was legal. That was the law. You're allowed to do whatever you want. It took the 24th Amendment to abolish the poll tax, because the way they were trying to keep poor minorities from voting was there was a tax. You had to pay to vote. So if you didn't have the money to vote, you couldn't vote. So we had to get rid of that. And the march from Selma to Montgomery in Alabama is organized to try and do voting rights. That march, once again, ended up in the Voting Rights Act. There was the Emancipation Proclamation. There is the Civil Rights Act. It's still not good enough. Okay, so now we need the Voting Rights Act, which made it illegal to force them to pass a literacy test to vote. Now, after the last election, you might say maybe the literacy test should be reinstated. But back then, it was just used to keep us from voting. So, 1968, he's shot, and Dreamville Jordan is happy to plead guilty. He's sentenced to 99 years. Between then, it took to 1983 before they recognized Martin Luther King as a figure for about anything. And as I said, once this happened, things kind of changed. Because you didn't really have the top person going, no, nonviolence, people are fed up. Nothing is really changing, because you can see that even where things have changed, they've kind of stayed the same. And there was a new prescription for getting things done. And the new prescription, as you will recall, was burning the city to the ground. And I think it took about 4 or 5 times burning the city to the ground before you guys got the point and said, all right, maybe this is something we're going to have to do something about. But it was completely changed. And so for me, that's why I go with my starting thing about 2 different worlds. The world in Great Neck Estates, the world living here, the world that there is in our church coming to, where people are accepted, where people can voice different opinions and not be put down. That's one world. There is this whole other world that is a problem. And one of the things that I came to the realization of, in these situations is it's not just one person. One person can do it, like, Trump, everyone can like it. It's America. This is the problem. How are we going to address America? This last election should be enough illumination to say it's not just one person. The entire country is red. If you look at the map, the entire country is red. How is it going to be? First, we thought it was just going to be, voter registration. I think we found from our last election, voter registration is not going to be that helpful. Because if you're not informed, if you're not educated about what's going on, you're just voting, who knows what you're voting for. It's a big problem. And one of the things that we do, and one of the reasons that it's so important for what we do, is trying to educate people about what's going on so that they can make an informed decision as opposed to just a decision. And that's kind of the legacy of what I got going through this. One of the reasons that I taught RE for so long, one of the reasons that I've been here for so long and involved in things is because there are so few organizations, so few groups, communities that are actually willing to listen and then try to do something. And that's why I'm glad everyone could come for this. And that's my little talk about my two different worlds.
Shall we give Bob another round of applause?